Have you heard about FHA and VA assumptions? Have you ever actually done one? I haven't, but we've been hearing a lot about these recently. And the one and only and great Anna Kelly is actually trying to execute a VA assumption as an investor. She is not creating mortgage fraud, saying she's going to live there. She is trying to execute a VA assumption. And we first heard about it, I think, 6 weeks ago. It's about time we got an update. Let's see what happened. Hi, Anna.
Hi, good to be here with you today. So
Absolutely.
one of the things that I started thinking about is as the market starts to shift and it seems that there's no deals that cash flow, as we hear from all of our, friends and investors, I always put on my, well, how can
Hmm.
I find a deal and make it cash flow? How can I find, an investment that other people think are not a good investment and make it into a good investment? And so obviously, we've got a time period in history where we've got high values and high rates at the same time, which is kind of
Hmm.
an anomaly, right? It's very difficult to find cash flowing properties at high prices with high interest rates at the same time, unless you're going to pay cash, for example, or go with some type of private lending, seller financing, etc. But I remembered from going back and my days in the 1990s at Bank of America, where we did some loan assumptions. And so, federally backed mortgages, those are backed by the USDA, that's the Department of Agriculture, FHA, the Federal Housing Association, and the VA, the Veterans Administration. And essentially, built within the language of those loans is an assumption clause. And it basically says you can sell your house and you can let somebody assume this mortgage at your interest rate for the remaining term at the same payment. And so the clause, in theory, allows somebody to come in and basically qualify for your loan with your lender and just take over payments. And so I thought, okay, if I can find an assumable loan that will allow me to buy it as an investor because I'm not a homeowner, then I think that's a way that I could get a really low payment and really great rent and cash flow. And so I did some research and I found a few things that are really important. One is FHA and USDA will not let an investor assume a loan. No exceptions at all, zero. If you are an investor who wants to house hack, which Michael and we both highly recommend, you want to live in a 3-unit or a 4-unit, create some income, live below your means like I did at one point, you can qualify for a loan assumption and take over someone's interest rate. And if it's a VA loan, there are exceptions that the VA will make to allow investors to assume a loan. And there was a lot of mixed information on the internet, right? You can't always believe what you read on the internet. So I called the Veterans Administration and I called Penny Mack, who basically services all of these, holds these Veterans Administration loans. And I got through to the assumption department. So this is firsthand information. And they said, generally, we want to issue home loans to homeowners. And so we prefer that an assumption be someone that's going to live in the property. However, because of the economy and we want to help veterans move, we will make exceptions for investors to assume a VA loan. So I said, great, I've got that information. I'm going to go put some offers on VA loan assumable properties. So I found a property in San Antonio, Texas. Just to give you an example, and I don't remember the exact numbers on the top of my head, but at today's interest rate, and this was back in August that I made an offer on this property. At today's interest rates, which, in August was a little bit lower, I think it was like 7.5%. Property would be negative cash flow $200 a month with a $2,200 a month rent, negative $200 a month. Now that included property management and maintenance, which we always want to build in. Negative cash flow, I would have said, no, deal didn't work. Their interest rate, Michael, was 2.75%. Super low. So with that interest rate, I was actually going to cash flow, I think, $460 a month. So think about the difference, $660 a month difference, being able to assume a loan in the 2 range, less than 3, versus buying that same property today. So I said, great, let's do it. Now, the only negative to some people is that you have to usually put a lot more money down, because sometimes these loans, they've already paid down their mortgage and the property value is now higher. So in my case, I think I was going to be out of pocket with down payment, closing costs and everything, maybe about $75,000. So it was a bigger down payment on a $300,000 house, essentially. But the interest rate was so low that it was going to make me a really good return on my money for today, double digits. And so I put a property under contract. I told them, I'm an investor. I may or may not qualify. I'm going to have to ask for an exception, but they had had their house on the market for a while and nobody else was really biting. And so they were willing to let me do that. So full disclosure, you need to, if you're going for one of these properties, if you're an investor, VA are the only ones that will work. You need to let them know, I'm an investor. I'm going to have to ask for an exception to assume your loan. This could take some time. And they do take some time. But I let them know that we got it under contract and I went forward with the application. So let me just tell you that the application process for assuming mortgages is long and it's hairy, and it's a government-backed agency and a mortgage company. And so it was quite frustrating and eye-opening. But essentially, they said from the beginning, it's probably going to take 60 days minimum, 90 days more likely, and maybe even longer to go through this loan assumption process. So it's much longer than if you were just to go through your own lender. But again, no pain, no gain. Why not try? And we'll see how things go. So I submitted the paperwork, and essentially what happens on these assumptions, at least from the VA side, because the VA is the only one I've gone through with, the homeowner has to fill out a form and submit it to their lender. And then you have to fill out a form as a buyer saying, here's my information. Yes, I want to buy the house. Yes, I want to assume the loan and I'm willing to apply. We submitted that paperwork and it took them 2 weeks to call me. And I was trying to call. I tried to get the name of their lender to call directly. Couldn't get through to anybody at the mortgage company. So what happens is when you want to assume a mortgage, and this is this case for VA, FHA, and USDA, you're getting approval from the seller's lender, whoever it is they have the mortgage with. You have to go through them directly. You can't go through your own broker that you know, like, and trust. So you're new to them, they're new to you, and you're just another piece of paper that they have to shuffle. So the timeliness is very, very slow. So they called me and said, okay, now that we're calling you, we're going to explain the process, and then we're going to set up a phone appointment to take your application over the phone. And that appointment can't be set for 3 weeks. So 2 weeks to get a phone call, 3 weeks later, had a scheduled phone application. They called me an hour late, and we went through application. Well, as you can imagine, for many investors, it's not a simple application process when they ask, how much do you own and how much do you make and what properties do you have? And I'm like, this would be much easier if I could send you my tax returns and my, financial statement and all of that, but I'll give you the high level numbers. So we did an application. And before I did that, I said, before you pull my credit, I want to know, will you allow an exception, because I'm not going to live in the property. This is an investment property for me. And I need to know before that you will, make a note that I'm an investor, but I'm asking for an exception to your process. And they said, well, no, our mortgage company has an overlay, and people don't realize what overlays are. It means that just because the VA or the FHA or the USDA says that you can assume the loan, that doesn't mean that the lender that the seller has the loan with will allow you to assume the loan. And so for me, they said, as an investor, we usually don't approve them. And I said, well, since I know the VA will you submit a request for an exception? And can we do that before I apply and you pull my credit? No, you have to apply, we'll pull your credit, and then we'll put on there that we want the exception. So I applied, they pulled my credit, didn't hear anything back. They were supposed to send me a package by Friday. didn't get anything. Called him Monday, called him Tuesday, didn't hear anything. And I get a call from the realtor, my realtor, that says the seller was just sent a letter that you were denied from
Oh,
assuming their mortgage. And I said, oh, well, that's interesting because they haven't called me. So I was denied for, I believe, because I wasn't going to live in it. The check box that they sent me said, you were denied because we can't verify your residence address. And I said, well, you can verify my residence address really quickly. And it gave a phone number to call to appeal. So I called to appeal and said, I can show you my address. It's easy to verify. Please call me back. And if this is actually a denial because I'm not going to live in it, then I want to talk to you about that. And I want to figure out how I can appeal the process. So I called every day, Michael, for a week, sent an email, left multiple messages, had the seller call and their agent call, and we heard crickets. We heard nothing. And so finally, these poor sellers, they were in the middle of a divorce and they were waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for their own mortgage company to do this. I released them from the contract and said, you guys, you know,
I'm sorry,
your
can't help.
lender's not being cooperative and I don't want to hold you up any longer. And so I let it go. So it was a very painful process. It was a good learning experience. And what I would say is that if you are willing to go through the time, especially if you want to live in it, because then you can go through FHA, USDA, or VA. But if you're not going to live in it and you're an investor and you want to find these, because there's a lot of them now on the market, Michael, there is
More
a
and
lot of
more.
supply
Yeah. More and more.
of these homes. And so if you have the fortitude to do it, the biggest key that I've learned is before you ever put it under contract, or if they make you put it under contract first, that's fine. But be, you know, full disclosure, I'm going to need an exception, and you need to get the name of the lender that has the mortgage for the seller. Talk to someone there directly and get in writing that they don't have overlays, that they would consider you as an investor, you know, on a VA loan before you go through the process, because you don't want to be tying up, you know, people while
Yeah.
you're waiting forever. So my experience was kind of painful, but I said to the agent, let's try it again. If I can find another VA loan assumption from a different seller that I can talk to their lender in advance and they've had
Yeah.
their property on the market and can't sell it, I'm willing to go through the process again. And so the key is finding a lender who says, yes, we don't have overlays. We'll let you buy it as an investor. And I'm going to try it again. And I would encourage your listeners to try it again, because it's a very good opportunity, rare opportunity. Assumptions haven't made sense for
Yeah.
15 years because interest rates kept getting better instead of worse, and you didn't have to put as much money down. But it's one way, one tool in the tool belt that could allow you to buy cash flowing properties today and help out sellers who otherwise are not finding the buyers to sell their property and be able to move and relocate.
Absolutely. Anna, it's always amazing. You just bring us with the truth. You're willing to do the work, all that great stuff. Where can people find you?
Great. You can find me here every week. Social media, Anna Kelly, REI Mom, and my website for coaching and consulting at AnnaKellyInvesting.com.
Thank you so much.